I was 18 years old when my family publicly proved that my future meant less to them than my sister's beauty. 11 years later, at my sister's wedding, her groom looked across 200 guests, ignored the bride completely, and called my name instead. In that single moment, every lie my family had spent more than a decade telling about me began to collapse. But none of it makes sense unless you know what happened at the graduation party that was supposed to celebrate me. I was standing in my parents' backyard, wearing a blue dress I'd bought myself on clearance for $19. I remembered the price because I'd paid for it with money from my grocery store job. I'd been working there since I was 16, saving every paycheck while keeping my grades high enough to earn a full academic scholarship to the University of Michigan. Tuition, housing, books, everything was covered. 3 days before the party, the acceptance letter had arrived. I must have read it 40 times. My guidance counselor even called my mother personally to tell her it was one of the strongest scholarship applications she'd ever seen. My mother simply said, "How nice." Then she started planning the party. I convinced myself that meant she was proud of me. I imagined for the first time that maybe I'd finally get the parents other kids seemed to have. The ones who bragged about their children. The ones who framed diplomas and embarrassed you by telling strangers how smart you were. Instead, I stood in the backyard with my scholarship letter folded inside my cardigan while guests slowly filled the yard. Relatives, neighbors, my father's coworkers, my mother's friends. Everyone laughed, ate, and talked around me as if I were another decoration. My younger sister, Avery, floated through the crowd like she owned it. She was beautiful in the effortless way people constantly commented on. Tall, blonde, naturally charming. Adults couldn't stop telling her she should be a model. She hugged me. "Congratulations." For about a minute, I believed she meant it. Then I noticed she was wearing a brand new designer dress. My parents hadn't bought me one. I told myself it didn't matter. Then my mother looked me over from head to toe with that familiar expression I'd known since childhood, the silent inspection that always ended in disappointment. She sighed. "At least she's smart," she said loudly to my aunt. "God knows she didn't inherit the looks." Several people laughed. My father chuckled into his drink. Avery smiled sweetly before adding, "She looks like somebody's middle school teacher." More laughter. Not everyone joined in. Some people suddenly became fascinated by their food. Others looked away. But enough laughed that the sound hit me like a physical blow. I stood there holding the scholarship letter I'd spent years earning while the people who were supposed to be celebrating me turned me into the joke. I looked at my mother. "Why would you say that?" Her smile vanished. "Don't be so dramatic. We're joking." Except I was always the joke. I didn't cry. My family would later tell everyone I threw a fit because I couldn't take teasing. That never happened. I smiled politely. I ate half my dinner. I watched everyone sing around a cake with my name on it. And I made one quiet decision. I was leaving for college in 2 weeks. I wasn't coming back. 2 weeks later, I boarded a bus with 2 suitcases and just over $300 I'd saved from work. My parents didn't drive me. They said they already had plans to take Avery to visit dance schools that weekend. I took the bus alone. College became the first place where I learned what real friendship actually looked like. My roommate became family in a way my own relatives never had. Back home, life moved on without me frighteningly fast. By Thanksgiving, my old bedroom had already been turned into Avery's beauty room. A cousin texted me pictures because she assumed my parents had asked first. They hadn't. By Christmas, my name had disappeared from the annual family card. The photo showed my parents, Avery, and even the family dog. There wasn't a place left for me. The following summer, relatives had already started talking about me as though I'd simply disappeared from the family by choice. I kept calling for a while. I sent birthday cards, holiday messages, checked in on everyone. Most of the time, I got nothing back. Eventually, I stopped trying. I accepted that I wasn't grieving the loss of a family anymore. I was grieving the family I'd never actually had. 11 years passed. I finished college early. I built a career that had nothing to do with the people I'd left behind. I became a reconstructive surgeon. Every day, I helped people rebuild faces that accidents, fires, and trauma had taken from them. I spent years learning how to give people the chance to look in the mirror without fear again. I loved my work. It was difficult, demanding, but it mattered. One of my patients was a young man named Ethan. A factory explosion had destroyed much of his jaw and left him barely recognizable. His older brother never left the hospital. Every night, he waited outside the operating room, asking only one question: will he ever look like himself again? I never made promises I couldn't keep. I only promised we'd do everything possible. Over the next year, we performed several reconstructive surgeries. Recovery was long, but eventually Ethan smiled again. Not exactly the smile he'd had before. His own smile. When he was finally discharged, his brother sent me a handwritten letter thanking me for giving his family hope again. I kept that letter. Then life moved on. By the time I turned 29, I was living in Boston with colleagues who had become close friends and a career I had built entirely on my own. I rarely thought about my family anymore. Then an ivory envelope arrived in my mailbox. My sister Avery and Nathan Carter request the honor of your presence at their wedding. No explanation, no apology, no message acknowledging 11 years of silence, just an invitation. I left it on my kitchen counter for 3 days without touching it. My closest friend from the hospital picked it up when she came over for dinner. "You're going," she said. "I haven't decided." "Yes, you have." That night I told her everything: the graduation party, the jokes, the bedroom, the Christmas cards, the years of pretending I had never existed. She listened without interrupting. When I finally finished, she smiled gently. "You spent 11 years becoming Dr. Hannah Carter. I think it's time they saw who you became." The next morning, I mailed the RSVP, salmon. A few weeks later, I drove back to Ohio alone. I checked into a downtown hotel instead of calling my parents. Lying awake that night, I realized I wasn't nervous. I wasn't excited either. What I felt was something much older. A part of me that had waited quietly for 11 years. The vineyard was beautiful. Rolling hills, white tents, string lights, everything looked expensive. I arrived exactly on time, wearing a fitted emerald green dress, and walked inside without hesitation. I've walked into operating rooms where lives depended on my hands. Walking into a wedding was easy. I noticed my mother before she noticed me. Then our eyes met. Her smile froze instantly. My father stopped talking in the middle of a sentence. Both of them stared as though they couldn't quite believe I was real. Neither of them came over. Neither of them even said my name. So I smiled politely and kept walking. I found a seat near the back and quietly watched guests arrive. A few minutes later, I saw Avery. She looked beautiful, confident, radiant. She spotted me across the room. The color drained from her face so quickly that one of the bridesmaids instinctively grabbed her arm. I held her gaze for only a moment before calmly looking away. The ceremony was short, beautiful. Nathan looked at Avery with complete sincerity. Whatever else was true, he clearly believed he was marrying an honest woman. An hour later, the reception had begun. Guests were scattered across the terrace with drinks in their hands. I was standing alone, looking out over the vineyard, when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. Nathan was walking straight toward me. He stopped a few feet away and stared as though trying to remember where we'd met. Then recognition filled his face. "Hannah?" He paused. His expression slowly changed from surprise to confusion. "Why didn't you tell me Avery was your sister?" Nathan kept staring at me. For a second, I couldn't place him. Then I remembered. Not from my family, not from Avery. From a hospital hallway nearly 2 years earlier. His younger brother had been rushed into the emergency department after an industrial explosion. His injuries were devastating, and Nathan had spent the entire night outside the operating room wearing a shirt stained with someone else's blood. He had stopped me before the first surgery. Quietly, respectfully. Will my brother ever look like himself again? I told him the truth. We're going to do everything we can. Over the next year, my team rebuilt his brother's face through multiple surgeries. Recovery had been long, painful, and uncertain, but eventually he smiled again. Nathan never forgot that. Now he was standing in front of me at his own wedding, looking genuinely confused. Before I could answer, Avery hurried over. She slipped her hand around his arm. "You know her?" Nathan still wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me. His voice stayed calm. "Dr. Carter saved my brother after his accident." Several nearby conversations immediately faded. People weren't trying to eavesdrop. The silence simply spread on its own. Only then did I realize why Nathan looked so unsettled. He had never known I was Avery's sister, and my family had never mentioned him to me either. Nathan smiled faintly. My family talks about you all the time. My mother's face lost what little color it had left. Avery forced a laugh. That's funny. Hannah never mentioned knowing you. I haven't spoken to Hannah in 11 years, my father interrupted sharply. His tone carried the confidence of someone who had repeated the same version of a story so many times that he'd started believing it himself. Nathan slowly turned toward him. Why? Just one word. No accusation. Just genuine confusion. My mother stepped in immediately. It's complicated. Families drift apart. I looked directly at her. Is that what we're calling it now? Avery's expression hardened. Please don't start drama at my wedding. I didn't start anything, I answered calmly. Your fiancé asked a question. Nathan stayed silent for several seconds. He looked at Avery, then at my parents, finally back at me. His jaw tightened. You told me, he said quietly to Avery, that your sister cut everyone off because she was jealous of you. The words landed like stones. There it was. The story my family had spent 11 years telling everyone. Not that they'd mocked me, not that they'd erased me, not that they'd removed me from family photos, turned my bedroom into yours before my first semester was even over, or spoken about me as if I no longer existed. Instead, I was unstable. I was bitter. I was jealous. That had been their explanation all along. My mother took another step toward Nathan. This isn't really the place for this conversation. I think, Nathan replied without raising his voice, it's exactly the place. He pointed toward me. The woman you described as bitter and broken is the same woman my brother thanks every single day for giving him his life back. Whispers spread through the guests. Not excited whispers, uncomfortable ones. The kind people exchange when they suddenly realize they've been lied to. Avery's smile finally cracked. Nathan's mother slowly stood from one of the nearby tables. She looked directly at Avery. You told us Hannah believed she was too successful for the family, she said evenly. You said she wanted nothing to do with any of you. Avery swallowed. For several long seconds, she couldn't answer. Finally, she whispered the worst possible thing. I didn't know Nathan knew her. That's not true. You're misunderstanding. Just one sentence that admitted everything. Nathan slowly took a single step backward, away from Avery, away from the woman he thought he knew. He looked at her with quiet disbelief. I need to know who I'm marrying. 200 guests watched in complete silence, and judging by the look on Avery's face, she knew she no longer had an answer that could save her. I didn't feel victorious. People always imagine moments like that as triumphs. They picture the person who was hurt finally winning, watching everyone who caused the pain collapse in front of a crowd. That's not what I felt. I felt tired. The kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying something heavy for so many years and finally realizing you don't have to hold it anymore. For the first time since I was 18, a room full of strangers had seen the truth. Not the version my family invented, the real one. The next few hours were messy. Nathan's best man quietly began leading guests back toward the reception tent. Nathan disappeared with his parents. The celebration had stopped feeling like a wedding. My mother found me first. She approached carefully, already wearing the expression she always used before rewriting history. Hannah? I think we all made mistakes. I looked at her. No, her face tightened. We were all younger. No. You misunderstood. I didn't misunderstand anything. I spoke calmly. You mocked me at my graduation. You erased me from the family. You removed me from Christmas cards. You turned my bedroom into Avery's before I'd even finished my first semester. You told everyone I abandoned you. Every sentence landed harder than the last because none of them were exaggerated. Everyone was true. She opened her mouth several times but couldn't answer. My father walked over a few minutes later. For once, he looked older than I remembered. He rubbed the back of his neck before speaking. We did what we thought was best. I almost smiled. For who? He didn't answer. Instead, he stared at the ground. I hope you're doing well, he finally said. So do I. Then I walked away. I didn't shout. I didn't insult them. I didn't demand an apology. There wasn't anything left to win. Later that night, while I was back in my hotel room, my cousin texted me. Nathan and Avery had left the venue separately. The reception never really recovered. Guests still stayed for dinner. Someone eventually cut the wedding cake because 200 people had traveled across the country and it seemed unfair for them to leave without dessert. That detail made me smile more than anything else. Life has a strange way of continuing, even after everything falls apart. The next morning, I drove back to Boston. About an hour into the trip, my best friend called. So? I told her everything. Nathan recognizing me, the silence, the question, my parents' faces, the single step Nathan took away from Avery. When I finished, she asked quietly, "How do you feel?" I thought about it for a long moment. Then I answered with the only words that felt honest. "I feel like I finally closed a chapter." She laughed softly. "So? Peace?" "Not exactly, but close enough." 3 months later, another handwritten letter arrived at my office. It was from Nathan. He didn't write about the wedding. He didn't apologize for his family or ask me to forgive mine. He simply thanked me again for saving his brother. He told me Ethan had gone back to work, that he'd gotten engaged, that his family still talked about me with enormous gratitude. Then he wrote one sentence I still keep in my desk drawer. "I don't know what your family told people about you all these years, but in our family, we've always told everyone the truth, that you're extraordinary." I folded the letter and placed it beside the first one he'd written after his brother recovered. The next morning, I performed another reconstructive surgery, another frightened patient, another family waiting outside the operating room, another chance to help someone rebuild what life had taken from them. My mother called twice after the wedding. I never answered. She left careful messages filled with regret, but never once admitted what she'd actually done. My father never called. Months later, my cousin told me Avery and Nathan had never gotten back together. I wasn't happy about that. I wasn't sad either. Some endings simply happen because the truth finally catches up. People often ask whether I forgave my family. Maybe one day I will. Maybe I won't. Forgiveness isn't something you owe people because they got caught. It's something you choose when it finally helps you heal. What I know for certain is this. At 18, I stood in a cheap blue dress while my own family laughed at me in front of everyone who was supposed to celebrate my future. 11 years later, I stood at a vineyard while a man who barely knew my past spoke my name with more respect than my family had shown me my entire life. That was enough. More than enough.